The most powerful thing that is happening today is, in my mind, the lack of appreciation that we have as humans that we are living in the golden age of humanity. Never before in a time has there been so much positive news, so much abundance, so much growth, so little poverty, so little hostilities, and so little pain. If you look at it, the last 50 years have been dramatic. They have been dramatic by any measurement you want to take. If you look at poverty, more people have been taken out of poverty, according to the United Nations, in the last 50 years than the 500 years prior. Our lifespans have increased by about 30% in the last 50 years. And today, for every year that advances, we're getting an extra third of a year in life expectancy. If your great-grandparents are alive, go ask them who was the leader of the community in which they lived, or the president of their nation, and you will find that your health care and your health is better than the monarchs of 100 years ago. From an economic perspective, every decade, the economic growth rate has accelerated, including the most recent decade, with the Great Recession. Deaths due to hostilities have reduced by 75% from 50 years ago, by 60% from 40 years ago, by 25% from 20 years ago. Any measurement you wish to look at, any measurement, we are significantly ahead. And the remarkable thing about the human species, and the remarkable thing about the last 50 years, is that we are doing so well that we are finding things to worry about. We spend our time wondering about all these problems that we manufacture for ourselves. And the dramatic nature with which we manufacture these problems is astounding. We manufacture problems around food, which I think is rather remarkable when I'm in Munich, and it's probably the #1 city on this planet on vertical farming. When I look out of my hotel window, I see more vertical farming taking place in this city than in any other city I've been in. And the recent advances in vertical farming show us that if we conducted vertical farming in all the buildings in Manhattan, we could feed 50% of the population without importing any food. The second remarkable thing about it is that it takes up 90% less land, 90% less energy, and 90% less water in order to accomplish that. We talk about water being the new oil. Currently, technology exists where nanotechnology membranes using tidal power can sift through saline water or seawater, desalinize it at 95% less energy. Yeah. global warming. Craig Venter, who decoded the human genome, has already found a biosynthetic organism that creates energy while removing carbon dioxide from the planet. MIT currently has the ability, using femtography, to see around the corner. 3D printing is so prevalent now, it's actually turning the supply chain upside down. 4D printing is around the corner with smart materials developed to such an extent that the chips in the materials can detect if the fluid is hot or cold, arrange the temperature on the outside in such a way that it feels room temperature to the human hand. 3 months ago, a titanium jaw was printed using titanium. An 83-year-old woman replaced her jaw due to oral cancer. The cost of that titanium jaw was $86. If you bought it on the open market using normal medical devices, it was $16,000. The most conservative space agency on this planet, the European Space Agency, is currently looking at 3D printing using regolith or moon dust in order to create housing on the moon. There are discussions going on how we're colonizing it. The private sector is working hard on that front. We will see it in our lifetimes. And when we look at all of this stuff, the question we ask ourselves is this a wave where we are simply getting ready to take off on a new charge where everything's going to grow faster and we're going to become healthier and live longer and with less hostilities? Or have we passed our best days and we will look upon the time behind us as the good old days? I would argue that the best days are yet to come. The best days are yet to come because of the rapid change that is taking place through technology innovation, through mobility, through the internationalization of our language. It was remarkable. I was speaking in Shanghai, China, and I mentioned this to a couple people over breakfast. At a conference like this with 600 people, of which 90% were visibly Chinese. It was a mixture of multinational corporations and government-owned enterprises, and only 1 in 3 of the audience was using an automatic translator. We have unified the way we communicate through the English language, which is no longer English or American. It is truly a global language. We worry when 400 people in Syria get killed, it becomes the headlines. We forget the wars of old when we would measure it by thousands and 10,000s, not by tens and hundreds. We're living in such safe times that if 3 people died in a car accident, it would be the headline in the local paper. When the Chilean miners were trapped and 2 of them died, it was headline news because there was nothing else to talk about. There were no other deaths around the world to talk about. We're living in remarkably positive times. So where does the risk lay? Is it just ourselves? Or is there a true risk that's coming out? I believe that the true risk that exists today is only one. And that risk is the risk of meaningful work. Work is something, when we developed as a species, that has become very recently changed, from really putting food on the table to defining what we did to who we are. Work places us in a society in a manner in which we not only identify ourselves, but those around us. And the rapid change that is now taking place is creating a bifurcation in the workforce between commoditized and non-commoditized employees. We are now risking the non-commoditized workforce by stripping them of their dignity. We're treating them as replaceable parts. If that behavior continues, there will be a massive bifurcation on this planet. The technologies are coming down so dramatically, everything from driverless cars, a little bit I talked about regarding 3D printing, which is absolutely going to upend the supply chain. Robotics in healthcare has already begun in terms of taking care of the aged. It is now entering into our daily life cycle. So when you really think about that device that we carry, today the technology exists where you do not need to carry that device anymore. Google is already, you've heard of Google Glasses, an RFID tag stuck under your skin with a Jawbone speaker will stop you carrying that device. And before you say, yuck, I'm not going to stick something inside me just to become a little bit more superhuman, let me ask you a simple question. What was the number one accepted drug by humanity? Does anyone know the answer to that question? Anyone want to guess? Viagra. Superhuman performance. This was only the male half of the society. It was humorous 15 years ago, now it's a matter of fact. And I'll finish on the last note, which is our youth. I completely embrace our youth. They are absolutely amazing. The people in their teens, 20s, and early 30s have embraced this notion that I refer to as cosmopolitan ethic. They don't care who you know, they care who you are. They don't care about what you can talk about, they care about what you can do. They care for the planet in a way that no generation has ever cared for. They believe as much in experiential compensation as they do on financial compensation. I, for one, am really glad that they're inheriting the planet. In 2010, 1 in 6 marriages were to a visibly different ethnic group. So I'm not talking about German ancestry marrying French ancestry. I'm talking about white and black, brown and Native Indian. I'm talking about different parts of the world. 1 in 6 marriages, and that is rapidly accelerating. I take the example of my daughter who headed off to Argentina to open up her own business after having been a banker in New York. She lost all her money, refused to pay off the local cops, so they dug a hole in front of her restaurant. She went belly up. Comes back with a husband, an Argentine husband I might add, with Croatian background, who didn't speak any English. No habla español. He's learning English. And this change that is taking place is so energizing to me that I look forward to the future with tremendous optimism. And today, the group here today, as you're looking at your workforces, the way you're going to make it smarter is by doing 2 things. adding productivity into your organization, and making sure that every human that you interact with is treated with dignity and compassion. If we can reinsert the notion of meaningful work into our society, I believe we're just beginning a multi-century cycle